Good morning, or depending when you're watching this, good afternoon, good evening, or good night. My name's Ross, and as always told, I had a voice radio. So today, we are looking at one of the stupidest decks I have seen in my many years of playing Pokemon. It's Turtwig GL. Now, we talked about Wobbuffet the other day. That's a fairly silly deck. It got me thinking about silly decks. I don't know if I've seen one as ridiculous as Turtwig. Now, this came out back in Rising Rivals, and I just did my top 10 a couple of days ago for that. And here's the thing about Turtwig. He's an SP Pokemon. Now, SP Pokemon were all basic, not unlike GXs have been recently. And these were powerful Pokemon, fully evolved Pokemon that are basics. Mamoswine as a basic. Garchomp as a basic. And then we got Turtwig. But Turtwig's actually quite an interesting Pokemon. Now, it's got a Poke Body. As a side note, nowadays we call them all abilities, but it used to be that a passive ability that was always operating was a Poke Body, and an active ability you had to use was called a Poke Power. That if your HP was 60 or less, you did 30 more damage. Moderately useful, but not amazing. What was really good here was the attack Giga Drain. 30 damage for a grass double colourless, and you get to remove the number of damage counters from Turtwig that you did. Now, 30 for free energy back then was not good, ladies and gentlemen. Now, we did have the SP tool Energy Gain that you could attach to Turtwig to reduce the energy cost by 1, but of course you wouldn't then be able to use Expert Bout, more on that in a minute, so you generally wouldn't play it. You would have to build up Turtwig the old-fashioned way, although come Heart Gold Soul Silver we did get double colourless energy back. I saw people playing this in tournaments. People talk about it online. Google it if you don't believe me. It was a little bit ridiculous. But here is what you did, ladies and gentlemen. You try and get Turtwig as bulky as possible, and then you hit for as much damage as you can to heal. So to start off with, Turtwig has 90 HP, which to be fair for an evolving basic is pretty good, except he doesn't evolve. You are not allowed to evolve this Turtwig up into a Torterra. First thing you do is you play Shaman Landform Lv.X. He gives an extra 40 HP to all of your Pokemon that are grass type. Now, you could use Seed Flare as well. Choose as many grass energy from your hand as you like, attach them to your Pokemon in any way you like, and then you do an extra 20 damage for every energy you attach in this way. You can even use that to build up Turtwig, but remember you're using a whole bunch of energy on Shaman to do this attack, so it wasn't all that nice, but you could at a push. The other thing you have to remember if you weren't playing back then, you could only Lv.X a Pokemon when it was in the active. So you would have to put Shaman in the active, Lv.X it, and then retreat, kind of like evolving it, so you got to wait a turn, pop it in the active, Lv.X it, retreat, before you would get this extra 40 HP. Little bit annoying. Although, good news is Lv.X's do not give up 2 prizes, so there is that. You then play Snowpoint Temple as your stadium for the turn. This gives you an extra 20 HP. So Shaman puts you from 90 to 130. Snowpoint Temple puts you from 130 to 150. And then you would play the tool card Expert Belt, which gave you an extra 20 HP, while allowing you to do an extra 20 damage. So now, with Expert Bout, Snowpoint Temple and Shaman, this Turtwig has now got 170 HP, and I assure you, ladies and gentlemen, that back then 170 HP was ludicrously high. A couple sets later, in the Heart Gold Soul Silver sets, we got the Primes, and Stage 2 Primes, you're looking at like 140 HP. So 170 was a lot. Okay, now we've got Turtwig up to a whole bunch of HP. Now we need to make sure he's healing every turn, and we've got some options here. First, you're doing 30 damage per turn, you're healing 30 damage per turn. Yeah, not a bad start, but we need more than that, ladies and gentlemen. Well, we're already playing Expert Bout. Expert Bout means you do an extra 20 damage, so now you're doing 50, you're healing 50 per turn. Yay, but we can do better. Back then, we had Plus Power. Plus Power means all of your attacks do an extra 10 damage. So, in theory, you could play 4 Plus Power, and then you could be doing 90 damage, although you're not going to be using 4 Plus Power every turn, just to be clear. And then, of course, we had Cherim from Stormfront. Now, I have done my top 10 video on Stormfront, link in the description, and I didn't feature Cherim. Cherim wasn't amazing, but in this deck it would fit quite nicely. Each of your grass and fire Pokemon do an extra 10 damage. Gee whiz, does that sound anything like a card that was released fairly recently? Which means that if you had 4 Cherim on the bench, and you're not usually going to have 4 Cherim on the bench, but you could, then you're doing 90. 4 Cherim, 4 plus power, and an expert bout. You are hitting 130 damage. Healing 130 damage on a Pokemon that has 170 HP. Now, this isn't actually what you're going to be doing every turn. 60 to 70 a turn is achievable. 1 or 2 Cherims or plus powers. That's about what you should be expecting to be able to do every turn. But here's the thing. Turtwig is an SP Pokemon, so it has all of the SP tricks. Now, I've already mentioned energy gain, but probably more useful here is Poker Turn. Poker Turn was like a super scoop up, except you didn't have to flip a coin, and it was only used for SP Pokemon. Or to put it another way, it was a scoop up Cyclone, a card so good it was printed as an A spec and you could only have 1 A spec of any description in your deck, but only for SP Pokemon. And you could play 4 of them in your deck, which is a little bit silly. So you could then completely heal your Turtwig by picking it up whenever you felt like it. And of course, you would then get to reuse a Turtwig, reuse the expert bout, but you'd have to then reattach the energy. But of course, while you're attacking with and healing 1 Turtwig, you build up a second on the bench. When he's ready to go, you Poker Turn, and you start the process all over again. Wait a second, this Turtwig sounds invincible. Huge HP, decent damage every turn, healing, and when he's about to be knocked out, you Poker Turn for another Turtwig. What could possibly go wrong? Well, there are 2 things that could go wrong. Thing number 1, still a little bit clunky. You're still looking to have the expert bout and the free energy, and you want the Shaman, which is a Lv.X, and you want the Stadium, which might get bumped by your opponent, and you need the Poker Turn at the right turn, and it all gets a little bit much. But also, you're giving up 2 prizes. So if your opponent gets a KO, especially a one-hit KO, things will go very, very badly, very, very quickly. And there were plenty of Pokemon back then that could get a KO, but not everyone could. So let's run through some of the main attackers of the time and see how well they could do. Luxray GL Lv.X hit for 60, would often have an expert bout, which meant it hit for 80, with 1 Crobat G, 90 damage. If you haven't got an expert bout or anything else, if your HP is as normal, that's an easy 1-hit KO. Although, of course, if you do start adding Snowpoint Temple, Shaman, expert bout, etc., you come out of KO range. But even so, it's an easy 2-hit KO, and you've got to try and get free energy on every Turtwig. Garchomp C Lv.X did 80 damage with 1 Crobat, meant that you could get a KO if no HP was added. And again, often HP would be added, but you've got a fairly easy 2-hit KO here, and that's a bit of an issue. Not to mention, of course, that Shaman Lv.X is the most awkward piece of this pie, so to speak. So let's say you've got a Turtwig with an expert bout. If you replace the Stadium, they've only got 110 HP. And they're giving up 2 prizes, which means if you hit 80 with Garchomp, you need to use free Crobat G in order to get the KO. And with the aforementioned Poker Turn, this was far, far from impossible. Gyarados from Stormfront, he really was 110 with expert bout. That was the most he would hit. But again, unless you've got a Shaman out, then if your opponent bumps the Stadium, and Gyarados was playing a lot of Broken Time Space, then if you don't have Shaman out, then they're hitting 110, and that's the HP you've got with Expert Bout, but you're getting 1-hit KO'd. And then, of course, the stupidest Pokemon we had back then, Machamp from Stormfront. I mean, all the SPs are basic, so Machamp would just get an easy 1-hit KO on any basic Pokemon. Now, you could use Unknown G to stop this, but you couldn't Unknown G every turn. And that, ladies and gentlemen, is a little bit of an issue. Not to mention, of course, that back then we had both Infernape and Blaziken, who were, shall we say, quite good and moderately played fire Pokemon. Yeah, easy one-hit KOs, and they're taking 2 prizes if you've got an expert belt. So, was this any good? It was a fun deck, ladies and gentlemen. It was a perfect kind of deck to go and take to League, but honestly, probably not. Little bit clunky, and as soon as you face something like a Blaziken or a Machamp, you have absolutely no chance whatsoever of winning. But it's a deck I don't think all that many of you will be aware of, and it is, in my mind, possibly the stupidest deck we've ever had in the Pokemon trading card game. So I had to make a video about it. But if you think you found a stupider deck, ladies and gentlemen, that's what the comment section is there for. Go nuts, be nice. Make sure you like this video, subscribe to this channel, follow me at twitch.tv/PTCGRadio for some live action, and make sure that if you want to support the pod, you get yourself over to patreon.com/PTCGRadio. The most important thing, as always, look after yourselves until next time. Thank you very much for watching. My name's Ross, and you've been watching PTCG Radio.